Perfect. Heather, all yours.
All right, let's get started. So thank you for coming. Let's just flip to the next slide because why not? So here we are talking about how to price your work. I've got a little bit of an agenda up here. So we're going to start just by talking about some pricing concepts. So try and frame it. What should you be thinking about? What could sort of inform your point of view on this? We'll talk about some legal concepts, some marketing concepts, etc. And then we'll spend a chunk of time dealing with pricing methods. How exactly do you go about this? So I've got 3 different methodologies to propose. And then how do I get started? What do I do first? So I have a methodology to propose to you, and then hopefully we'll have lots of time left for Q&A at the end. So I should probably tell you a little bit, maybe a little bit more about this slide. Are you actually? I came at the thing that might be critical is that I came out of an English and French literature background. So it's like, what am I doing here? Sometimes I ask myself that question. But we can all come out of the backgrounds that we come out of and actually learn the technical skills. Oh my God. So with that in mind, I'm gonna flip to the next slide. No, that's okay. But there, I did it. Haha. So there's only it's a small group, so you could actually even go around. I just want to have some sense of where you're at. So maybe what I should do, because we're few in number, is just go around and get you to introduce yourselves to each other and talk a little bit about what your business is and sort of where you're at with it. So for me, the questions like related to pricing, all of this stuff becomes a little bit pointier if you're working on it full time. Right, if you're not working on it full time, or if you're still just thinking about it, then it's a little bit more hypothetical. So why don't I start with you and get you to introduce yourself and just say where you're at.
Okay, hi, my name is Dina. So I have been painting as long as I remember myself, but it's just lately that I've got an idea and started kind of to put myself out there. So with abstract paintings, usually start with small formats, but then transfer it to very big canvases, acrylic mainly. And I've just opened my Instagram account, so I'm thinking of print on demand, originals, all that.
Cool. Want to go next?
Yeah, my name is Maruta. I have always been, but life comes in between. You have to work to survive. You have your children, so I felt like I have put my creativity on hold, and now finally I have this chance. And it moved into technology, and it has evolved to a point that I'm like, whoa, I'm a little bit behind in this technology. So I paint mostly abstract landscape, but also the cultural things and cultural, from several different things. So I'm all over the place right now. But I don't have the courage to put myself out there. Tons of paintings inside the house. So just knowing where to start.
Where to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where to start to sell to be able to.
Right. Hopefully today will help you do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, my name is Maria. I'm also an artist. I don't know, my thing is kind of complicated because I do so many things at the same time. And as she said, I have to look for something to maintain my family and things. I work when they call me from the film industry that it's been 2 years like crazy. So I really haven't had like a lot of work. So I have been looking in different places and I don't know, maybe they see my resume and they see that I'm just an artist and I'm not good for anything else. So my art is with plasticine. I study arts, but I kept working with the same material that I started since I was like 5. Also, I'm a writer, so I have 2 children books. They were published in Colombia, so they are in Spanish and English, and the illustrations are also with plasticine. I have a novel a book that I wrote 400 pages. I do many things, I'm a writer, I'm this, I'm that, but any of those art are giving me money to have a life, you know?
Yeah.
I have two children, also two children, no, they're 21 and 23. But in all that time, I have been, the time that I have left, I have been doing many things. But those many things, they never produce any kind of money. Like, I feel very good and proud with myself of all the things that I do, but we need money.
Yeah.
So I'm a writer and this and that, so I don't know really where I am at the moment. So it's like, yeah, I need money. And I don't know how.
Well, we'll try for that. I can't tell you who you are, but maybe I can tell you how to put a price on what you do.
I'm Elena. I am an educator and artist. I graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts way back when painting was like the thing that I went to. And I stopped for a lot of years, life got in the way. And rediscovered my creative side like 4 years ago, but with ceramics. And so now I'm kind of translating my painting style onto three-dimensional forms. And setting small goals for myself every year, because I do want to transition to something more creative. As much as I love teaching, but I would love to teach art one day as well, and have a studio or a teacher. But yeah, public education is pretty tough right now, so I don't see myself staying in it until I retire. So yeah, so I'm just starting to sell. That was my goal this year, and I got into my first sale and starting to sell some things, but I struggle with pricing. I just don't know how. I think I'm undervaluing, and then some things don't sell, and I'm like overvaluing it. So yeah, they want to find that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that gives you a pretty good idea of where everybody's at.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into this crazy thing. Let's go further. So if you're confused about it, so is everybody else, unfortunately. Like this is, it's not a science. There's no science to this. There's no correct answer to it. So it is an art. It is basically an opinion. We're going to talk about formulas and calculations. We will, but those are tools. And really the thing is to have your opinion about what your price should be. So at the end of the day, you need to pick a number. We will definitely talk about some calculations that you can do just to back it up and give you some sense about where you should be. But the basic message is you have to just put yourself out there and try, and you have to assume that you're going to get it wrong, right? Assume that you're going to get it wrong, and then you're going to try again. So what do I mean when I say you're going to get it wrong? How can you possibly know whether you've gotten it wrong? It's not, you're never going to be entirely sure, right? But if you're selling your stuff at a show and you put your prices on things, and I come along and I'm like, that's so cool. How much was it? And you tell me a price, and I go, oh, great. Shit, that's the wrong price. She would have paid more, right? So you kind of can tell a little bit from the reactions. So that, that's one way of doing it. If you're selling everything all the time really easily, your prices are too low, right? So there's no categorical, objective way of knowing. There's just your observation, forming an opinion, trying something, seeing how it goes, trying again. And we'll talk more about technique, right? What I just said is incredibly vague, so we'll try and get it down a little bit over the next hour. Yeah.
I don't know, do you think that maybe sometimes it's the place that you're using to show your art? Because, yeah, it depends. Maybe a lot of people like your artwork, but maybe they don't have the money. I think that's most of the cases, and that is not saying that your art is not good and maybe the price is too high. It's the price. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah, entirely possible. It's definitely one of the factors. I'm going to keep forging ahead because I think that idea is going to lead in, right? I think that we're going to find sort of a home for that. So here we go. So it's all about relationships, and it's about working on both sides. So you're all about, like, it's my livelihood, I need it. And the buyer's all about, what do I need to give up to have this thing, right? If I really want this thing, what do I have to give up to get it? So if the price doesn't work for the buyer, that's it. They're gonna walk away. They're gonna say something polite and leave. And if you make it work totally for them and it doesn't work for you, then you're not gonna be in business long, right? You're not gonna be able to afford it. So it has to work on both sides. It's gotta be a relationship. And that's a brutally difficult thing to say because you know what the nature of a lot of these things is, right? You're selling at a craft show or a fair or, you know, whatever. And the relationship lasts for a few minutes until they walk away or until they buy something. So it's a bit of a dance. So let's keep forging ahead here. So here's a chunk that I wanted to interject that might be of use in thinking about what a price is. So this is a legal definition of fair market value. So what is fair? We're talking about the relationship between the buyer and the seller, and that it has to work on both sides. So in a situation where there's two sets of competing self-interest, what is considered fair? So I want to read this out loud and then we can kind of unpack it a little bit. So fair market value is usually the highest dollar value that you can get for your property in an open and unrestricted market and between a willing buyer and a willing seller who are knowledgeable, informed, and acting independently of each other. So for example, fair market value, if you're selling to friends and family, it may be, that might skew fair market value, right? You want to be kind to the people in your life, so you might not be asking for the highest possible price that you can get. The whole piece about willing buyer and willing seller, unlikely to arise in the case of art, but it does happen. Like for instance, something that sometimes happens to people, you buy a house, you get a mortgage, the bottom falls out of your life and you stop being able to make the mortgage payment, so the bank repossesses your house and sells it to recoup the loan as a power of sale. That is an expression, power of sale. So in a situation like that, there's no willing seller, right? The bank doesn't particularly want to be in that position. You sure as hell want to be in that position. So that's going to skew things like fair market value. But where you guys are most likely to be selling, it probably is pretty fair. Knowledgeable is always an open question. How knowledgeable is the average buyer about art? Widely varying, right? But that's something to think about, right? When you're thinking about your pricing and what it should be, I think that the operative thing is the highest value, right? Fair value is the highest value that your customers agree is fair. So in other words, don't pull your punches. Punching the last minute. Okay, let's go ahead. Oh, this is a super important one. So let's think about profit on both sides. What is profit? Profit is what's left over after you've covered your costs, right? So we can talk about accounting because that's a whole super fun thing in and of itself. You need to have a methodology for figuring out what it costs you, right? That's difficult. So if you're doing a painting, you use a little bit of red, and you use a little bit of blue, blah, blah, like you've got probably a selection of paint at home and you top it up periodically, but it's not like I'm buying this paint and I'm using it all on that canvas. I've got a studio with stuff in it and I use it for this. I once myself did a jewelry making workshop, right? In terms of cost, what the instructor said to us was, she knows how much each bead costs, and then she knows how many beads she used, and she knows how much the findings are. Well, that's easy, right? She's using specific supplies to make a specific product. She knows what that costs. It takes a little bit of work and diligence to maintain that, but it's on a different level from figuring out what does it cost to do a painting, right? The canvas and the frame, that's easy peasy. You know exactly what that is. The paint, gosh, right? You're going to have to sit all that, but you need to know what the cost is. So I sell it for this. My cost is that. There's the profit. There's the calculation. But what is the profit for the buyer? This is a really important point because I have to give something up in order to get your wonderful painting. And I have to feel like there's a profit for me. I have to feel like the money that I'm giving up is somehow a little bit less than the joy I'm going to get from owning the painting. So this is highly, highly subjective, right? It's in my head because might like, oh, I'm just in love with this, I must take it home. And other people might walk past it and go, leaves me cold, not interested at all, right? So it's a very, very subjective thing, and you're absolutely right. You have to find your market for your art, right? But this whole concept, the buyer profits by gaining something, whatever, beautiful, useful, satisfying, whatever it is. Keep that in your head because that becomes part of your. So let's move on. And of course, we talked about profit. Don't forget to pay yourself. Just as a suggestion, do you guys know CARFAC? Yeah. CARFAC, Canadian Artist Representation, Grand des Artistes du Canada. So CARFAC is the Professional Association of Individual Visual Artists in Canada. They have plenty to say on pricing. They have contract, right? If you get to the point of doing a show like this, people will sometimes show in restaurants and cafes, stores, or whatever. CARFAC is a contract for that, right? So that if you get to that point, you want to be talking to them. What I was going to say about CARFAC was one of their campaigns was called Has the Artist Been Paid? And they have Groovy buttons, which they may still have, that you might want to get a hold of and wear to your shows to remind yourself you need to pay yourself. Like you are responsible for your own income. As a self-employed person, you need to set your price line, you need to make sure you get paid. Nobody will do it for you, unfortunately. So make sure that you've done it. So I've got the idea of tracking your direct costs up there. You need to set a price high enough to cover the costs and leave something for you. Sounds really easy. When you say it fast, it's simple. We'll get into it in a little bit more depth. That's coming up. The thing that you may want to think about is how much would you make as an employee?
What was the name of the organization?
Oh, there we go. The moment for the whiteboard. I knew that. Pull it out here a little bit. So. Oops. So it's known as CARFAC, and if you Google CARFAC, for sure you'll find it will pop right up. So check them out for resources. They've done a lot of work. The other thing that used to live in CARFAC, and I'm not sure if it still does, but this is sidebar piece of information, is Artists Legal Aid Service. Artists Legal Aid Service is a really good thing to just put in your back pocket. I hope that none of you will ever need legal aid services, but just know that somewhere out there's a group of lawyers who like to help artists, and that's what they do. And so it is known as ALAS, so Artists Legal Aid Service. And you used to be able to pitch up with them through CARFAC. So that would be if you need help getting advice on a contract or a legal matter, or if you wind up in a dispute with somebody and you need some assistance. If they're still around, they're the guys that do that kind of stuff, and it's on a legal aid basis, so you get a certain amount of it for free. Right, so this is just simply good to know that there's a bit of infrastructure around this whole thing. It's not you out there on your own. There's a bit of legal support out there. It's not extensive, and you need to know where it is, but that's an idea. So how much would an employee make? You are your own employee, right? So let's flip onto this delightful, super fun thing, which you guys have a handout for. So give me this so you can take it home. So let's talk through this. So this is not categorical, but it gives you some ideas about what you might want to earn. So think about it. Ontario minimum wage right now it's going up in the fall, but right now it is $16.55 per hour. If you made minimum wage full-time, 37.5 hours per week, you would walk away with an annual salary of $32,272.50. And what's that third column? Well, if you were full-time minimum wage, your employer would be required to give you a minimum of 2 weeks paid holiday. So in other words, you're getting paid that lovely $16.55 an hour for all 52 weeks in the year, and you get to take 2 weeks off, paid by your employer. Well, if you're paying yourself, it doesn't work quite that way. If you're paying yourself and you want to take 2 weeks off, for the 50 weeks that you're actually working, you need to be making $17.21 per hour. Then there's 2 weeks where you make nothing. But if you work 50 weeks at $17.21, then you come out at that $32,272 annual salary. Now, I'll tell you for free, actually, yeah, living wage is up there. I'll tell you for free, $32,272. I probably don't even need to tell you this. It's not really enough to live on in Toronto, right? No. Median Canadian salary is the next on the line. So this was in order by size, but the median and the average live on the same website. That's Statistics Canada data. The most recent year they've released is 2022. So in this delightful handout, like if you get it from Anna digitally, you'll be able to click through the link, but if you Google this, it'll pop right up, easy peasy. The difference between the median and the average rate, this is the same pool of data. The median is just simply the middle number. So if you listed every Canadian's salary from top to bottom, the median would be right in the middle. The average is the calculated value where you add up all the salaries, divide by the number of people, and the average is higher. Notice that. So that would be the latest 2%, right? There's a few super rich people on top that drag the average up for everybody. There's a whole lot of people earning crap wages. There's just a few people earning lots of money, and they're enough to drag the Canadian average up a bit. So the average Canadian makes $56,000, but the median in some respects is a more accurate representation of where the middle is, even number of people above and below. The Ontario Living Wage Network, now this is interesting. This is a charity, a voluntary body, whose job is to research what it actually costs us to live in certain areas. So it's a very interesting website. They divide Ontario up into regions, and I think that there's living wage networks in other provinces as well. So not surprisingly, Toronto wins, yay, yay Toronto. So we're way more expensive than the other regions in the province. So what this actually represents, this $45,591 per year, that is the wage you would need to get to live a modest average life. So, no expensive vacations, you're gonna have staycations. It's based on, they did a couple of models. So so your standard model would be a couple with 2 kids in elementary school. So they're figuring, what does it take for that couple? They're gonna live in an average apartment. They're gonna buy typical groceries every week. The kids have some activities, but there's nothing lavish going on. So to live life in that way in Toronto in 2023 took about $45,600. So it's just a good benchmark. When you're thinking about selling your art, if you wanted to live on that, then you need to say, okay, how much can I produce? How many paintings? How many pieces of ceramic? How many processing sculptures? Like what can I do in a year? What am I capable of doing, right? And how much do I need to sell them for in order to come up with something like that? And remember, that has to be your profit, right? So you're thinking in terms of, if I wanted to live off my art in the way that sort of a decent minimal living in Toronto is between 45 and 46,000. So I need to be selling that much in art, plus I need to cover my costs. So that would be my studio, my materials, my transportation, my marketing costs, my membership in Carfax, my whatever. So it's food for thought, right? It starts to put parameters on where you need to be if you're living off, right? If you have other work and you're dealing with the art as a side hustle kind of thing, it changes the equation, right? It changes how much you rely on it. But this gives you something to think about in terms of where you need to. Price versus value. So this is super important. So you need to set these things apart, right? Price is the factual objective thing. I stick a sticker on it, right? Like the price, you can see what the stickers are for these things. Just gonna walk over here so you can match it up. this piece of art has a price of $1,000 on it. Right, so price, purely objective, we're all seeing the same thing. We know exactly what the price is. The value is a subjective thing. So I pulled a dictionary definition out. What is value? Value is the regard that something is held to deserve, the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. So who sets the price? Seller's going to set the price, right? You're going to set the price. Who decides what the value of something is?
The person that wants the art.
That's it. So the value is set by the buyer. So if we go to the next slide. So there we go. So it's the customer, and you know that you've sort of made the link that you've set the right price if they agree that the value to them is greater than or equal to the price. So there you go. There's the little mathematical thing, the greater than or equal to slide. Oh my goodness, there it is. So the value has to be greater than or equal to the price. And the optimal thing for you is that the value is equal to the price. That's where you're getting the highest price. If the value to them is greater than the price that you asked for, then they would have been willing to pay more. Right? But if they bought the thing that you have offered, then intrinsically you know that the value to them is greater than or equal to the price. The question is, how much would they have paid? If you've been that much braver, would they have paid a bit more for it? And you'll never know the answer to it. You'll never know. Because it's not like somebody's going to tell you. Right? All you can do is try to evaluate the relationship. How did it feel? If you get too much, oh, that's great. Then ask for more money, right? Okay, so to summarize where we're at so far, your art business needs to meet your needs. It needs to meet your customers' needs. So it's got to be excellent work. It's got to be something they value. It's got to be at the right price. We've got that little equation. Value has to be greater than or equal to price in order for the sale to happen. And you need to think about the customer and how they value the product. There you go. There's a thankless question because you cannot be inside their head. All you can do is observe their behavior. So this is harking back to one of those early slides where it's like, you're going to try pricing your work, you're going to see what happens, you're going to either like the result or feel disappointed by the result, and then you're going to try that. Okay, so let's dive on in. Okay, well, I threw this poll, but I think that we've kind of talked, right? We've kind of talked so we know where everybody is. We can flip past that and get into some of the technical concepts. So this is getting us towards some numbers. So your price needs to be within two distinct bookends, let's call it. The floor price and the ceiling price. The floor is whatever it costs you. Right? You cannot sell the artwork for less than it costs you to make, otherwise you're losing money. So you do need to have some idea of what it costs for difficult work that might mean when you're using supplies that use for multiple pieces. You still need to have some idea of what the cost was. And we'll get into this in a little. I'm harking ahead to a future slide, but it's not just the material that went into the work. It's the fact that you paid fees to enter an exhibition or a craft fair. It's the fact that you created an Instagram account, you paid somebody to help you, might have hired a photographer to photograph the work, you might have done any number of things that are part of your picture of costs, right? So the floor price needs to take all of that into consideration. The ceiling price is the maximum that the market will bear. So above that ceiling, forget it, nobody's going to buy this. Just not going to happen. If she was pricing this work at $10,000, it's probably a cinch that she would never sell it. At $1,000, you know, easier to sell, right? Easier to sell a piece at $1,000 than $10,000. My question there, how can you tell where the ceiling is? Spoiler, that's a rhetorical question. There's no way to answer that question. You don't really know exactly where the ceiling is, so you just keep trying to find it, right? And ideally, your pricing is hovering around the ceiling. That's where you're aiming for. All right, forward. Price, there we go. Price, so this is lingo that people throw around. Price point. So I thought it would be useful just to talk about these definitions. So price is the actual amount that you're charging. The price point is defined as one point along a range of hypothetical prices. Right, so I could price my work anywhere in here. I'm not going to go below the floor and I'm not going to go above the ceiling, but everything in between is a potential price point. How do I pick the number? The price point could also be defined as the price at which customers are still attracted to your product if they compare yours to the competition. Right, so people are, you know, if I was thinking about buying this art, I'm like, okay, I've got this slot on my wall. Is this the right thing for it, or do I want something else? Right, so I'm probably not gonna. I mean, I might walk in here and fall in love and say this is the one. I don't need to look any further. But chances are pretty good if I was trying to fill a spot on the wall, I'd be walking around. Trying to go to the Toronto Art Theatre. I go around and try and get things, right? So I'm going to be comparing not just the work and the appeal of the work, but I'm also going to be comparing prices and figuring out what's affordable. So price point is important from that point of view.
I have a question. Well, I really don't know how to ask you, but as artists, do we have to pay any kind of taxes or something in a year? Because I believe that will like raise a little bit our price. But until now, every time that I have been paid like with a check, right, or cash or in transfer, but I never charge HST or anything like that. Right?
HST. Okay. Should we go there? Should we go there? We'll go there. We'll go there briefly. It's a really good question. HST is one of the types of tax that you need to be aware of. Income tax is the other one. So maybe just spend a few minutes on tax. It's important. So harmonized sales tax is the tax that's applicable in Ontario. It's made up of two things. There's a federal component, there's a provincial component. Right? So harmonized means that Ottawa gets some of that tax money and Queen's Park gets the rest of it. So there are rules around when you are required to register, and the threshold is once you have sold $30,000 worth of work within the last 12 months. So it's always rolling. So right at the moment I would be it's actually calendar quarters, which is an accounting concept. So at the moment I would be thinking from June 30th back to last July 1st. So did I sell $30,000 worth of work in the last 4 calendar quarters? No. Great, I don't have to register for HST. So that's the magic number. Once you've exceeded that number, then you're required to register, and then there's stuff to be done.
So do you ask that question to yourself after every month, like if you're evaluating in the last 12 months?
It wouldn't be a bad idea
Okay.
to keep your mind on it.
Yeah.
But you're also obliged to, this is kind of the counterbalance. Here's how they find what you're also supposed to do is to declare your income, right? So all of those payments that you got, you should be reporting on your income tax return, right? So on your income tax return, you report two things. You report, here's what I sold my art for, and here are all my expenses. So you're only paying income tax on the profit, right? So if they see that your profit is north of 30,000, or if they see that your gross sales, they can see your gross sales. They see your gross sales, they see your expenses. If they see that your gross sales are above $30,000, the CRA's system will flag it, right? It's automated. So the income tax boffins don't even have to do anything. Their system alerts the HST boffins to say, is this person registered for HST? And they find you.
And well, because there is no way that you're gonna know that in 1 year, maybe you are gonna receive more than $30,000. So maybe when you are going to present your taxes and you are not charging HST in whatever you are doing, and then maybe you produce like $31,000.
Mhm.
So you register at the time, and are they going to charge you since then HST, or they are going to charge HST of that money? So I don't know.
What you're gonna do is, starting from that point, you have to register for the tax, and then you have to charge your customers. Right, so this thing that's being sold for $1,000, if she's registered for HST, it's actually the customer's actually gonna pay $1,130, 13% on top of that, and it's her job to hang on to that 130. 1,000 is her money, 130 belongs to Justin Trudeau. Chair, right? Right, so you have to hang on to that money and send it to the vets. So it's on you to do it, nobody else will.
It's, my question is that you really don't know if in 1 year you're gonna produce more than $30,000.
You don't know ahead of time.
Yeah.
You're looking back. So the system is based on the idea, on several ideas, that you're gonna keep track internally, that you're gonna have some kind of records, and that you're gonna file your taxes every year. So if you're on track with those two things, then when you file your taxes, you'll be able to go, okay, last year, what did I do? What did I do during 2023? $29,000. Okay, I'm good for HST. And then when you file again in 2024, you go, $31,000. Do it. And then you register for HST and start charging going forward.
Okay, so when you see that, okay, you are selling your work, okay, it's better to have HST out there. Okay,
But when people, they have like different jobs, right? It's not only sales, but this 30,000, it's
For
all
sales.
for
For sales.
just for sale, or like if I'm
Self-employed.
self-employed. But if I'm doing both, I'm self-employed with my art, but I'm still working as an employee.
The employee stuff is different because your employer is taxing you at source. So,
Okay.
right, so that doesn't count, it's just the self-employed piece. But if you are a writer and a sculptor and a painter and I don't know what else,
well, at the
Then-
moment, since last year, I have been offering art classes to the library.
oh, and she sells art classes too. So for your $30,000, because you've got a whole realm of things that you sell. So as a self-employed person, you're getting fees for art classes, you're selling books, you're,
Not yet.
well, potentially selling books, and you're selling artwork, right? So once those are all part of your business as the CRA would see it. Once your business is generating 30,000 a year, then boom, HST.
Do we have employment insurance? As a sales?
As a self-employed person, you know what? As a self-employed person, you can buy into it. You can. So it's something to think about. You don't automatically have it. And as a self-employed person, the EI coverage available to you is limited, right? Because the main purpose of EI is if you lose your job, you've got something to fall back on to bridge you until you can find your employment. If you're self-employed, then you're both the boss and the employee all rolled up into one, right? So what you can buy EI for, what makes it worthwhile, is you can pay into EI to get a maternity leave, right? Having a childless one, I would have had to, have kids as a solo person. I thought about it from part. But when I was of that age, there was no EI for self-employed people. I would have had to have no income. To have kids, so that was not very practical. So that now exists, right? That exists over the last 10, 15 years. So EI for maternity leaves, EI for caring for an ill dependent, right? Like if you are caring for a family member who's needs intensive support at home, you can get EI coverage for that. And I'm gonna forget, I think there's like 6 situations where a self-employed person can get EI coverage. You have to find your way in, to arrange it yourself. And you also have to have paid in for 12 months before you get any benefits, which sucks, because, you know, if an elderly parent suddenly needed your help and you were self-employed, you can't say to the EI people, oh my God, I'm gonna start paying EI right now because I need it. You have to have imagined it a year earlier. So it's very limited. Very limited, not tremendously, I would say. It's a very, very, very quick tour of EI and tax. Like, it's very much based on voluntary reporting, all of this stuff, right? Like if you're selling stuff out of your back, and you don't report it on your income tax, they have no way of knowing. The only way that they can figure it out is to audit you. How do they audit you versus auditing somebody else, right? Like, they might, but they are relying to a great deal on voluntary reporting. If you do the voluntary reporting, then the system itself starts to check for things like how much self-employment income do you have and should you be registered for HST. If you exist under the table, it's very hard to be defined. It is the truth.
Carfax also put on, or we have on, an HST workshop.
Yes.
Online before that I've been to, and it's really important. Yeah.
Michael Munn. It's a
Last
guy,
year.
it's a dude from the CRA who speaks really,
Yeah.
really, really fast.
If he speaks very fast, I'm not gonna be
It would, he's good though, you know, this is total, it's just industry gossip. So he's this dude at the CRA who just decided that the world needed to know more about HST. So he got his overlords in the CRA hierarchy to allow him to do outreach. So he's been out there in the community, trying to find people to speak to, which is good because the regulations are really complicated. They are really complicated. So he is actually making an effort to demystify it. I've just given you the very, very tip of the iceberg, which is when do I absolutely need to register, but there's a whole world of things that come after that. Which could be another archetypical workshop.
We already had the HST workshop.
Did you have Michael Monk in?
No, was a few months ago, but there's recording. There's a recording.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Here we go. The rule of three. This is a really good rule. This is a really good rule. So if I offer you two things, a higher price thing and a lower price thing, if you're like most people, you probably pick the lower price thing. If I offer you a choice of three things, then people tend to gravitate toward the middle price. So the middle price tends to be the anchor, right? So rule of three. So can you think of instances where do you see this in your life? People offering three price points. But that's kind of sort of it. That's
Small, medium, large.
small, medium, large. There you go. Perfect example. And what do most people buy? They buy medium, right?
Yeah.
They buy medium, and if you buy large, you'll.
Yeah.
I always buy the large anyway. I don't care. But people will gravitate towards that medium one. So it's like the Goldilocks concept, right? So let's flip to the next slide. So there you are. Small, medium, large, you know, fries. Do you want small, medium, large? Oh my God, the small looks too small. The large looks really tempting, but a lot of people will go to the middle. Economy class, premium class, first class, silver, gold, platinum, standard, premium, deluxe, blah, 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 blah. So here we are in the middle of the gallery. We've got the perfect illustration of this. So these items here are all either $150 or $180. Right now, I didn't look at all of these, but I noticed that one was 500.
550, 500.
500, and then craft dinner back here is 400. I'm surprised nobody snatched that, and 450, and then you get to the big kahuna over here, $1,000, and this one's 700. So I would say that from a pricing point of view, these actually are kind of grouped, right? She's said, you know, if you like my work and you don't have a lot of money to spend, you can walk away with one of these tasty little things for $150, right? And then she, you know, hypothetically, under these pricing concepts, these middle ones are gonna be easier to sell, right? So people think, oh, you know, I could get a little one, and I really like the Driscoll's only the finest berries one, but I also like the Vida, however you say it, and go drink. Right, and I'm gonna sort of look at those, and the middle ones are gonna seem okay, right? Like the $1,000 one sets a cap on it that makes these ones feel more affordable, right? And then these ones, you know. So there we go, the perfect example. Multiple price points, it's harder for your customer to say no. Right, if you like this work, then here's examples like I can afford this, I can afford this person's work, at least at the bottom end, if not at the top end. So, right, creating comparisons, right? So I'm walking around and I'm looking at, you know, how much space do I have on my walls? How much money do I have in my pocket? Okay, so I'm comparing her work to her work, right? If I see something I really like here, maybe I forget about looking any further. Maybe, oh, I'm not sure that I'll see anything that I like better at the price of it, right? But I've walked around and I've seen her work at different price points, and that helps me anchor something in my head if I like her work. So for instance, if you were selling jewelry, like if you look at like a sort of shrewd jewelry seller, they'll have rings and things that you can buy for $20, something small, or they'll have very, you know, elaborate necklaces that might be north of $200. So if you like the work, they'll offer things at different price points. So with paintings, you've got the perfect example here. With ceramics, it would be the same thing, right? Like I can buy a single mug, or I can buy an entire coffee set. So think about how you can keep the person at your table, right? If they like your style, give them something that's affordable to them, right? The wine list, I have to tell a story about this, because I got some of my pricing stuff from a consultant called Ron Baker. So he's a dude from California. He lives in lovely Petaluma, which I think is somewhere north of San Francisco. He's not that far, I guess, from the Napa Valley. So he talked about taking a client to a swanky restaurant in Napa Valley. He talked about the wine list as a perfect example of pricing strategy. So on this wine list, you know, Napa Valley, it's the center of wines. So they have on the menu a bottle of wine that costs them 5 figures, like north of $10,000 to buy this bottle of wine. Just one, but that's the big one. And then they have a whole range in the hundreds, and then they have another range that are below $100, right? So, you know, if I'm there with my family, I'd probably say, let's chintz out on the wine. We don't need to spend hundreds of dollars on wine. The, you know, $50 bottle is probably just fine. But if I wanted to impress somebody, I'm not going to spend $10,000 on a bottle of wine, but damn it, I'm not going to cheese out. If I was trying to impress somebody, there's no way I would buy a bottle of wine for less than $100. And if the core of that menu was bottles of wine in the $300 or $400 range, if I wanted to impress somebody, I'd pull me up for it, right? So that's a really good example of having even just one item on the list that's really pricey, that contextualizes everything else you're buying. Pricing methodologies. Okay, so we started with more generalized ideas, and now we're getting closer and closer to the numbers. Here we go. So I want to talk about 3 specific methodologies for actually picking a number, getting down to brass tacks and saying, okay, enough of the concepts, let's choose. So I wanted to talk through cost-based pricing, market value pricing, value pricing. So here we go. Let's have a look at cost-based pricing. So like you might imagine, if it's cost-based, let's flip to the next slide. If it's cost-based, you have to identify your costs. So I've blathered on up here about some of the costs. So this would be a moment where you might want to like jot down, what are your costs? So I have to imagine for paintings, it's canvas, it's in paint, it's hammer nails, tools, equipment,
Like easel brushes.
studio, you have studio space. So, you know, that, you know, maybe at some point, Do you travel around? I don't like to get from point A to point B. Do you go out to meet with people? So mileage costs or TTC, however you get it down, that's a legitimate business expense. If you can sit down in front of a CRA and with a straight face and say, I spent this money to advance my business. Here's how and why. It's a business expense. So keep those TTC transfers, if that's how you get around. Keep track of mileage in your car, right? If you're driving your work to an art fair or an art show of some sort, mileage is a legitimate business expense. Your accountant, whoever does your tax prep, that's a legitimate business expense. You're doing your personal return, right? So they've got employment stuff and they've got self-employed stuff. You probably need them more for the self-employed than you do for the employment stuff, right? Filling in a tax return if you've only got 1 T4 slip, pretty easy. So all of those things are business expenses. So that should be in your bucket of costs. Everything. If you paid money to attend this, that's business expense, right? If you are on social media such that you need to pay social media fees, or you're getting somebody to help photograph your work or create video for you or whatever, all business expense. So cast a net wide. If in doubt, save the receipt. And if you're using a tax preparer, bring it to them and let them help you achieve it.
Well, this past year, well, when I present my taxes, the beginning of this year, the person that made my taxes, she told me, oh my God, I forgot what I wanted. Oh, well, because I gave her all my, well, I made like an Excel thing for all my classes in the library. And how much did I spend on materials?
Yep.
And how much for gas or TTC? And each of each contract for the library, I wrote like, for example, 11 kilometers from my house to the library. So the library to my house. And also, well, when she did all that, she said, okay, I have to pay like $900. What? I'm barely surviving. So she said, okay, are you using a car? Yes, I'm using a car. So how old is the car? The insurance of the car, the cost of the car, and she also put something about the rent of my apartment, like that, something like that. But it's something that just someone that knows about the taxes, how we don't know about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like there are many things that we don't know that the taxes maybe or guide whatever they know. Like a great day just to call.
It's worth it, even just for one cycle. You go to them once to learn, and there are people out there that focus on artists, right? That do a lot of tax returns for artists. So what you need to do is ask around, see who people go to, because you're right, it's the regulatory stuff in general. And if they're really on their game, they also know what the CRA is looking at these days, right? That's allowable. Like, if I go to Mac and buy a bunch of cosmetics, great, that's neat. But if I'm an actor and I go to Mac and I buy a bunch of cosmetics, that's different. I'm using them for my acting. Well, apparently that's been a contentious issue with CRA, right? Actors and dancers claiming clothing and makeup, right? But a tax preparer who does a lot of that kind of thing will know. They'll know what the CRA is looking at the moment and say, well, I think you can probably claim it now. They seem to have agreed that makeup is legitimate if you're performing on the stage. So it's interesting, right? There was a case that went through the Tax Court of Canada, and the person lost, but it was a lawyer, a high-priced female lawyer, who said, and this is true, I'm a woman, my clothes cost more than the clothes of my male counterparts. And when I go to the dry cleaners to get my suits dry cleaned, the dry cleaner charges more to dry clean women's clothing than they do to dry clean a male business suit. She had her arguments all marshaled, she had documentation, and the courts disagreed with her on that. But it was an attempt to have the courts acknowledge from a tax point of view that it cost her more to be a professional in the field than it did for her male counterpart. Now, the same kind of thing can happen with professions, right? And the opinion of the courts can change over time. So when you go to a tax professional, that's part of what you find. Right, you've got to find the right one, because if you go to somebody who only specializes in restaurants or whatever, that's not gonna help you so much, but you're absolutely right, that's what you need. Okay, pricing by cost, the fundamentals are to identify your costs and then apply a markup. So I know what my floor is, I'm gonna add a hunk for me. All right, moving on. Oh, there we are. So we basically talked about that. Right, selling costs, if you accept credit cards, the credit card company will charge you 2 or 3%. So if she sells that work for $1,000 and she sells it on Visa, then $20 or $30 off the top goes to Visa.
And I believe that the gallery takes commission. That would be
The commission is a cost to you, absolutely, right? So Arts and Total takes a commission, I don't remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
We take 30%.
30%. So she's gonna report income of $1,000 with a $300 commission cost against that. So her taxable income on that basis is $700. And then she's gonna deduct her materials costs, et cetera, to actually get her profit on selling this. So let's flip to the next slide. So this is pure accounting. This is really useful vocabulary for thinking about stuff. How do I categorize things? The direct costs are something that pertain directly. So the direct costs of this would be the canvas and the paint, basically. Indirect costs are all of the other things that can't readily be attached. So the brushes in your studio, the easel, the tools that you have, right? All of that stuff are indirect costs, but they need to be factored in somehow. Studio space, promotion, training, anything that you do that's the business overall that can't be tied to a specific piece is an indirect cost. When you're figuring out your cost, like you're just figuring out the cost for that piece, she needs to figure out what proportion of her indirect costs reasonably could be attached to that.
even like workshops that you're taking.
Absolutely, that would be, because you to run your business broadly, you're doing training and marketing and all sorts of stuff, right? So in other words, what you're gonna do when you're adding up your costs for the year is think, okay, how much did I spend to actually create the works of art? And then how much other stuff did I spend that was kind of around the creation that helped me run my business? So don't lose any of those indirect costs. The impulse of people is to forget about them because they're not nailed down as tightly.
For example, at the moment, I'm paying someone to read my book, a professional and organized, because I didn't go to university and learn how to write. So there is a professional that, do I have to save the payments?
You need to say proof, because if you were ever audited by the CRA and you said, well, I paid editing costs for my book of 2,000, a number.
Like the bank, so I have to pay.
Theoretically, what should happen is that person should give you an invoice. They should give you a written document and then you pay the invoice. So you keep that invoice. And if you were ever asked, you'd be able to say, here's the invoice from the editor. And there's where I took it out of my bank account. And it's tying those two things together, the document from the supplier with the payment that went through your bank account that confirms it.
Okay.
All right, let's fly on down the road here. Right, easy to look, right, blah, blah, blah. Discuss it with your accountant or tax preparer, keep receipts. If in doubt, hang on to it, don't throw it away too quickly. Okay, so here's the piece that's for you. We talked about all the costs. How do we add the bit that's for you to get at the price? So there's a couple of ways of doing it. So a markup would be to add a percentage. So if I want to add a 50% markup and my cost is $8, then my 50% markup would bring my price to the customer at $12. Another way of thinking about it is a multiple. So I'm told that in the clothing industry, let's say that we're creating clothes for people. So we create the clothes and we're selling them then to a retail shop. And the retail shop is then gonna sell to their customers. I'm gonna double my cost to sell to the retailer. So if the garment costs me $10 to make, I'm gonna sell it to the retailer for $20. And that $10 spread is what I get paid. The retailer typically doubles it again. So the thing that they bought for $20, they're gonna sell for $40, and that has to pay for renting the store and the staff that they have and the advertising that they buy and whatnot. So that's kind of how that works. So that I am told is the norm in the clothing industry. Is that universal? Probably not, but it's a benchmark. The other benchmark that I have is in books, in the realm of books. What should the price of the book be? Well, it's often 5 or 6 times the cost of printing. So if it costs me $8 to print the book, then I should be thinking about charging $40 to $48 as a cover price for the book. And then at that rate, that's supposed to cover my time to write it and the editor's time to edit it and marketing costs and so on. So that can give you a little bit of guidance. Again, there's no right answer. Really good advice. Try calculating it more than one way and see what results you get. And then try averaging those results together and see what result you get and play with it a little bit. If you're pricing according to cost, you should always make money because you know what your costs are and you're always adding on to yourself. Remember, if you're selling through other people, you need to charge for your work in a way that allows them to also make a profit. You're creating the initial thing, but if you're selling to a shop that's going to sell on behalf of the Arts and Tobacco, right, it's taking 30% on this artwork, and then there's the rent. They're open 6 days a week.
Yes,
So they have to staff this place 6 days a week, right? One person is not going to do it, so they have to staff it. They have to promote the art. They've got to bring people here somehow. So they're maintaining a website, they're paying a webmaster. You know, there's all sorts of things that you have to consider that your shop is also going to have to spend money on. So remember to allow something for them when you're thinking about pricing. And if you sell direct customers, right? So if she's selling through Arts and Tobacco, then she has to remember them. If she's selling direct customers, then she gets the retail price. So if this thing doesn't sell and she takes it home and she sells it out of her basement, she's going to get the cost from us. All right, next slide. Fixed costs. Okay, so here we go. This is interesting. So I'm using Studio Rent and software subscriptions as examples. I'm not sure how relevant this is to you guys, but let's just play with the idea. Let's say, so here's just lobbing out another community connection. There's a company out there called Akin. So Akin's deal is providing low-cost studio space for artists. So they go into buildings that are slated for redevelopment. So, you know, the redevelopment cycle in Toronto, the building could be vacant for 2 or 3 years before zoning happens. So Akin would come into a place like this and they would probably, I have to think, but you know, 8 artists in space, right? Everybody gets a little spot. You have a space for your easel, there's a shared sink, a shared environment, but it creates a space where you can have a studio. So let's say that you're paying Akin $100 a month for your studio. That's a fixed cost. If you take a month off, you're paying $100 to Akin. If you have the most productive month of your life, where you're cranking out work every day, you still pay $100 to Akin. So the fixed cost doesn't change. The more usage you get out of it, the lower the price, the lower the cost per unit of your work, right? So if I'm using that studio every day, I get more value out of it than if I only go in there on Sundays, right? So it's just a concept to think about. Lower usage means a higher cost per use. And if I use it all the time, it's lower cost per use. So there we go. So fixed cost illustration. So there we go. Let's say this feels like a very old-fashioned example, but I couldn't think of anything better. Suppose I pay $100 a month for my phone. If I use it 10 times a day, if I make 10 phone calls a day, each call costing 33 cents. If I use the phone 20 times per day, each call will cost me 17 cents. And if I use the phone only 5 times per day, then suddenly the cost per call is 67 cents. So you can sort of think about things in that way. It's a way of sort of calculating the value and helping you make a choice about how you're spending your money. Variable costs change with the level of usage. So the accounting speak is that the cost per use tends to remain stable. The total cost goes up or down. So if you're producing a whole lot of paintings, the amount of money that you spend on paint is obviously going to go up. So look for efficiencies, buy in bulk if you can. If you have a place to store stuff, try and buy it in bulk. You can buy clay, in bulk. If you've got a place to put it, better buy it cheaply because that will reduce the unit cost for the work you're producing. So here we go, putting those two concepts together to figure out how to calculate where do I break even. So you could look at all of the costs associated with something and say that they are either fixed or variable. So they keep pointing at it. So the variable costs associated with this painting are the materials, right? Because she could use more or less paint, she applies it more or less thickly, whatever. So that gets through the variable cost base. The fixed costs would be things like if she has a studio, if she's got, if she's paying anything, notional costs, etc. So the fixed costs, she needs to be pretty darn sure that they're worth it for her, and she knows what the variable costs are. So if your fixed and variable costs are equal to your price, you break even. That's over the decision. Questions on that? I sort of glided over that pretty quickly without a lot of calculating. What you would wind up doing is trying to parse out what were the direct costs, what were the variable costs associated with that painting, and then attribute your fixed costs to the work and see if the price is equal to or greater than the total fixed and variable costs. Okay, see nodding, so we're good. Should you use this? Well, it's straightforward and easy to explain. It's a reproducible calculation, right? Like you sort of know what it is. And it certainly makes it easier to predict revenues, and it tends to take the emotion out of pricing. If I say I'm going to, calculate my costs and double them, then you don't have to agonize about it. It's just done. Con is it's brutally difficult to allocate costs. Right? Very, very difficult. And it completely ignores what the customer is willing to pay. So the big weakness of cost-based pricing is that it's about you and not about the customer. So let's move on to market-based pricing. So what does everybody else charge? Well, charge that. Or set your price in relation to that. So let's flip on to some detail about this. So this is where research comes in. So we need to figure out what are your customers buying. So if you're selling paintings like this, like I don't know what she sells, like there's the Toronto Outdoor Arts Fair, which is either happening or coming up really soon. It's
coming up. Yeah.
Coming up, like it's a summer thing. And then there's the Winter Art Fair in Toronto. I'm not even sure how many art fairs there are. If you're selling art and you think you might sell at art fairs, you should be at dedicated a ton of art fairs. Right? You should know. You're going to go not to buy, but to look at other people who are buying. Research the customers, try and figure out, who buys the sorts of things that you're selling. What seems to be doing really well? Why do you think people buy it? What are they getting out of the purchase? Try and think about this. Maybe yap to a few people. Think, oh, this is really interesting. What's the appeal? Try and strike up conversations and learn about what people are thinking at a point when it doesn't matter. Right? If you're yapping at an art fair to somebody else's customers, low stress for you, and you might learn something. So onward, research your competitors. Oh my goodness. So this is the brutal thing about art. There's a lot of people who make art, right? So you've got to figure out who else is out there, who's doing stuff that is similar to you. What makes art you similar or different? And it's subjective, right? Like, do you feel that your quality is better? Do you feel that what you're offering in the way of subject matter and content is more interesting to certain people than to other people? how are your competitors selling, right? So just one little tidbit is that often people who are selling art, they can and sometimes do congregate together. So if you went to Prince Edward County, right, there's a whole lot of artists that left Toronto at one point and went to Prince Edward County because it's cheaper. Flesherton up towards Collingwood is another destination that drew a lot of people out of Toronto at the point when Toronto just became stupidly expensive. So I'm thinking years back, it's even stupider now, and I may not be thinking of all these places, but if you went to those little towns, there's a whole bunch of artists there, and it means that they can do studio tours together and they can collaborate to draw people in and market together and hopefully raise each other up. Right? So you should be looking very carefully, like attend those things. What are other people doing? How do they sell their stuff? How are they pricing it? And how would you compare it to you? Okay, next. There you go. Go shopping, talk to people, read things, attend events, like just get out there. Surfing, like, could you have a thingy on Etsy? I mean, I shop on Etsy every now and then, find interesting things on Etsy, right? Is it worthwhile? Is eBay still going? I don't know. Vendor websites, this is what you need to do to figure out if it's viable. You'll never know if the person who looks so great online, you'll never know how successful they are, but you can see what they're offering and try it out in your pricing and differentiation. So this is important. You need for market-based pricing. You're trying to compare your work to others and figure out where are you the same and where are you different. What's distinctive? So I'm not a huge hamburger eater, but I did a little bit of research. This is from a little while back, so I didn't check the menus for today's thing, but at Milestones, what I learned is you can buy a burger for $20 to $26. But if you really feel like a hamburger, you can go to Wendy's and get a burger for between $3 and $11. So what makes that distinctive? They're both burgers. They both probably claim to be Canadian AAA grade B. Burger, please. Sorry? Burger, please. Yum, delicious. Like, it's the experience, right? Like the experience of walking into a Wendy's and the counter and standing in line and getting your tray and go and find a little plastic table to sit at. It's different from going into a Milestones and the hostess seats you and takes you to a table. And when your burger arrives, it's nicely plated with a salad and some fries on the side, and it's arranged on the plate. Like the experience of being there is different. It's just different. So this is something that you need to think about, right? Like, are you the coffee time of visual arts, or are you the Starbucks of visual arts, right? And that helps you set your pricing. So you can price higher than your competitors if you can make an argument that you are better than them. And if you price below market, then it should be fewer, lower feature, right? Like the little Ford Escort costs a lot less than the Rolls Royce, right? Like that's what people look at. So this is a really good question. Should you try to undercut the market? I used to work for a theater company where they never wanted to raise their prices because they were convinced that if they raised their prices, the whole audience would stop coming. And I proved to them that the prices were already the lowest in Toronto and people weren't coming anyway, right? So what was actually going on in that case was that they would price really low. And then because the money wasn't coming in, the general manager would say, I need to pull back on the budget. And the only place where she really had discretion was her marketing budget. So she wouldn't really advertise the shows, and then it's like, there's something wrong with this picture, right? And I couldn't convince them otherwise. I don't think that you should ever price below market. Figure out what the middle of the range is and don't go below that unless there's a compelling reason, right? If there's a compelling reason for you to undercut other people, then sure, do it. But otherwise, low price might suggest cheap or poor quality or inexperience or something like that. If you price it too low, it's a disincentive to certain buyers. More appealing products get higher prices. They just do. So if your product is appealing, don't hold back. Believe in it. Okay, let's go on. Should you use this? So the pro is, yes, it takes the audience into consideration. It's not just about you. And if you know that you've done your research and your price is similar to your competitors, that's going to give you some confidence, right? Like if you know what other people charge for the same thing and you know that you're in that zone, then you're okay. You're not making a mistake theoretically at that point. The con is that, of course, it's incredibly difficult to research. Like, how do you know that you're gathering the right information? How do you know that when you're looking at somebody else's website or store or whatever, you know how successful they really are, right? So you don't know if you've got the information that you really need. And if they're not pricing well, why would you rely on that? Right? So again, you don't really know. And it also doesn't address the customer's willingness to pay because now you're pricing with respect to your competitors. So let's go on value-based pricing. Here we go. So try and get into the buyer's head and see what it's worth to them and price according to that. All right, let's see what the next thing is. So how much does a hotel room cost? If I wanted to stay at the Royal York, how much does it cost me to stay at the Royal York Hotel room? There's a correct answer to this question. And the correct answer is, it depends. It totally depends. There's no price for those hotel rooms, right? If I'm buying it on a Tuesday night in November, it's probably cheaper than if I'm going there for New Year's Eve, right? So same room, same services, same staff, same bed sheets, same toiletries, same everything, but the price goes up and down. Same thing with airfare, same thing with gasoline, right? It's the same thing, but the price floats up and down based on the market. Every time OPEC sneezes, gas prices in Toronto change, right? So the big players update prices dynamically based on demand. So next time you're looking at theater ads in Toronto, next time you're looking at Mirvish Productions, notice that they say prices start at X, right? I don't know this for sure, but I would be willing to bet money that they're using dynamic pricing. And the prices are going to start at that, and they're going to be less than that. They're going to pay less than, but I'm pretty sure that they've got dynamic pricing in place so that if demand goes up, they can take prices up as well. Value-based pricing. So if a show is really hot, the prices go up.
So surge pricing on Uber.
That's it.
Sure.
Yeah.
A surge pricing on Uber, like
Yeah.
like, you're gonna charge.
Hey, I had to take an Uber this morning. It was raining, so it was like twice. She thought earlier I'm taking TTC. So how do you do that? So match your price to the buyer. So telepathically link your brain to the buyer's brain. So this is another Ron Maker thing. So what's the price for a bottle of Coke? So Ron asked us this, and we all said, well, it's $2, whatever it was at the time. He said, no, it's not. Think about who the buyer of the Coke is. If the buyer is a retailer, and the retailer is buying a skid of Coke, then the retailer is paying much less, right? They're paying a discounted price, and they're going to sell it. If I go to the convenience store to buy a Coke, I'm going to pay a certain price. If I'm sitting in a hotel room, and I'm thirsty and I go into the mini bar and pull a Coke out of the mini bar, I pay a different price. And then he said, if you were crawling on your knees in the desert, trying to get to the oasis, and somebody offered you a Coke, what would you pay for that Coke? So it's interesting. We can't get into somebody else's head, but you can try and imagine some of this stuff. Right? Try and imagine what development. The big players, the way they do is they use tons of data. We don't have, none of us in the room has access to this, but it's interesting to think about what it's done. So I run a bookkeeping business, and I do try to do negotiation. Like if you come to me and you tell me that your books are a mess, I will probably believe that you haven't seen bookkeeping messes before. I'll try and figure out the extent of the mess, but I need to charge you more for the mess than if you walk through the door with something that's easy to deal with, right? So there's a component of value pricing in what I do, and it's based on one-on-one negotiations. So consider whether that would be possibility. Not sure exactly what situation that would come into play, but. All right, let's move on. So should you use this? So the big pro would be, if you're able to figure it out, this is where the value is going to be equal to the price. That's the holy grail of pricing. Remember, we said that in order for the buyer to say yes at all, the value to them has to be greater than or equal to a price. If you're pricing perfectly every time, then the value is equal to the price. That is the highest amount somebody will pay in the market. So value pricing is how to get at that. The con is it's impossible to figure out. You can't know. What you'll know is, it's the factor of what does it cost? Tell them it's like, oh, great. It's like, wrong. I priced it. So 3-step process. I'm out of time, aren't I? No, I can keep going though, can't I?
Yeah,
A little bit, yeah. I can keep
yeah.
So I have a proposed 3-step process for what are you actually going to do? So we talked through all sorts of ideas and pluses and minuses. So remember, there's no right answer to this. And you just need to do it. It's like jumping in the pool. You just need to do it and allow yourself to get it wrong. Right? When we were all 5 years old, none of us worried about tripping, falling down, and the grown-ups would keep doing that because we didn't. You just need to let yourself be wrong, and you can change your prices. So let's go for it. So step 1 would be set your floor. Cost-based pricing, we talked about that. Do the cost-based thing, crank some calculations through and figure out what your floor is and see how that feels. So,
Or maybe I missed it, but you never think it in kind of, so the hours of work, for example, because,
well,
it
that
takes-
was, yeah.
and it's also different for everyone, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm just because cost for materials or like things, the material things, that's fine. But then,
yes, because this is where like you're doing cost-based pricing, the markup has to be sufficient. You're absolutely right. And this is where figuring out what your time is worth. So we talked about that a bit. Minimum wage versus average wage. So you're absolutely right. The thing about time is that again, it's very subjective, right? And having talked to some people in the business, sometimes you go, and it's like, okay, I'm done with that one. And you'll then slave over something that's captured your imagination. You pick over it for hours and hours and hours and hours. And at the end of the day, you've got 2 things which might sell for the same price, right? So the time that you spend on it is another interesting thing where what's the right amount of time? When is it done? When is the work done? So I don't have an answer, but you're absolutely right. That's where paying yourself. Okay, so step 1, apply the cost approach. So let's go to step 2, apply the market approach. Okay. So figure it all out. Where do you sit relative to other people? Would you say you're at the high end or at the low end or middle? Be realistic, right? If you're right at the outset of your career, if you're sort of the emerging artist, maybe you're kind of at the low end for a while and you're working your way up, right? There's nothing the matter with that. So that should hopefully help you set your ceiling. Then step 3, I'm not applying the value-based model because it's too difficult. It's too difficult as a small seller to figure out how to do that. But this is for real. This is what you should do, and this will make a difference. So, not a word of a lie. This is what made a difference to me because I run a business, and I had, even though I'm running an accounting business and theoretically I know stuff, I had exactly the same problem that other people do, which is I don't want to piss anybody off. I want them to be my friend, and I don't want them to leave me, and I don't want them to say no next year, and I don't want to have an argument when they try and raise my prices. So my pricing committee is my staff, and I've actually gotten myself out of pricing because I'm the one that lowers. Everybody else is better at it than I am. And what you need to do is find your friends, right? So this could be family members, it could be friends, it could be colleagues, whoever it is, that is what you need because they're going to be more objective, they're going to be less invested, if they're the right people for you, they're gonna be honest in a kindly fashion, they're gonna give you constructive feedback about saying, you know what, I think we'd be better if we did this or that. And you might be surprised that it's higher, right? But then you've got your backup, they've got your back in terms of this, right? So that's it, right? Let's move on. So I have a few final ideas to share. So next slide. So special situations, discounts. So discounts, sure, need to, but think about other ways, right? If you're trying to sell your work to somebody and they go, "Oh, the first line of defense is to offer it in installments. So I thought of it that way, right? It's like, oh my God, I can't possibly pay this. If they say, well, could you afford $50 a month for the next 12 months? And I'll say yes and do it. And then they hang on to the art. I don't get to take it home until I paid the money, which is completely fair, but make it possible for them to buy. Find a way of making it possible for them to buy without discount. Discount if you want. So just like if you're really tempted, remember that the costs are still the costs, right? If you're compromising on the price, the costs are still the cost. But people do discount. Like if you're working with a dealer or a reseller, there may be a discount there. If you have a really good customer that's buying a lot of stuff from you, then a discount solidifies that relationship. It might be a really wise thing to do. If you've got somebody trembling on the brink, right? And it's like, well, if I took $20 off it, would that make the difference? Then sure, do it to close the sale. Family and friends, yes. I mean, you might want family and friends, great. Increases, this is much juicier. So you need to be thinking about, so economic issues. So when your costs go up, your prices also need to go up. So what happened in the fall of 2022 after COVID, inflation spiked, prices went up everywhere, right? So people's art prices, if they didn't go up, they should have gone up because costs of everything went up. Demand, if you are showing your work and you have multiple shows in a row where it's successful, you should be thinking about cranking up your prices. So this is from art dealers that I spoke to. If you're consistently selling work within a couple of months of creating it, then it's time to crank your rates. And if you've sold more than half of your last 6 months of output, it's time to think about a rate increase. So, and if you have a waiting list, obviously the next one after you've satisfied that waiting list, the prices go up. And the basic message there is go get it. Like, don't hold back. I mean, in my business, I put the prices up every year because I look at inflation, and there's always inflation, right? There is. And, you know, as soon as you have staff, what do your staff want to do? You want to raise, they want to increase inflation. So my costs go up every year. And it's not just that my staff want to keep pace with inflation. Every year they get a little bit more savvy about accounting and they want to be acknowledged. So no. So you should think about that as well, because every year, you know, you're maturing, you're thinking of new ideas, you're trying new things, your art is getting a bit deeper, richer, because you're older, wiser, deeper human being, and that's coming out of you somewhere. So that should be part of your thinking as well. And that's basically what I had to say. So I'm not too desperately over. It's such a big time for Q&A, and I'm absolutely happy to stay and chat a little bit more.